Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for being here because we have had a very strong competitive sessions like Hank Paulson, Steve Schwartzman. So many people are rushing to that. Although they want know more about Japan, but this time you say no to those panel and being here. I really respect your decision. But I don't let you down because we have a great panelist and who has different skill set to talk about Japanese economy and the Japanese future society. For your investment purposes, I think this session will be very beneficial. So allow me to introduce the great panelist from the ladies first because we put much importance on the female participation. So Cassie-san is Goldman Sachs, and she's well known and very influential and a great connector between business sector, parliament, and the government. And Prime Minister Abe counted on her a lot for helping him to improve the female participation into the business, especially the management level, like herself. And besides that, and her family is very successful in the West Coast in the flower business. So, and Yamazaki-san is a Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs, International Affairs, the Ministry of Finance. And he's literally number 2 in the most powerful ministry in Japan. And his pass went through by Kuroda-san, BOJ governor right now. So he'll probably be his successor over the top of the Ministry of Finance. And Hamada Sensei happened to be my professor in my university, Yale University, when I was a graduate student over there. And having as my professor in the panel is something challenging because in Japanese teacher-student relationship, we're not allowed to challenge him. So, but today, maybe we have a good time, yes? And he's a special advisor to Prime Minister Abe, and he's a key person in Abenomics. And John-san is the CEO of the Mizuho Securities in the US. And he's former AMRO, and he's engine of the growth of the Mizuho here in the US. He made 5 times bigger the business. Mizuho is one of the largest full-service financial institutions in the world, but he made his US business 5 times bigger than that was before he joined. So, great job. And allow me to introduce myself. I'm Kotaro Tamura. I'm an American Institute very first Japanese fellow, reside in Singapore. And I do teach over there at the National University there. And I set up a small company, advisory company, to provide a geopolitical analysis to Japanese companies and the Japanese government. And before that, I was a politician in Japan, a 2-term senator. And interestingly, 2006, 2007, the very first Abe administration, I was a vice minister for cabinet office in charge of fiscal and economic policy making. So I was one of the founding team of the Abenomics 1.0. At that time, we don't have 3 arrows, only 1 arrow, structural reform. But this time, thanks to the Hamada-san's join, Abenomics improved a lot. It's a 3 arrow full set reform plan. So we'll talk about that. And this time, some of you might know a lot about first and second arrow, fiscal stimulus and monetary easing. But many of them are said to be want to learn more about the structural reform. So I would like to consume the main part of this time for talking about structural reform. But I would like to kickstart, quick, look back of the first and second law, and especially the BOJ next move. Since I'm here, many investors are asking me that, what will be the next move? What will be the currency exchange rate? So nobody knows because nobody here from BOJ, and even we try to invite Kuroda-san, but he has a policy meeting this week in Tokyo. So he cannot make it, but even if he is here, he cannot touch upon that point. But we'll see. So in order to kickstart the discussion, I want Yamazaki-san to make a quick presentation about the newest update of the Abenomics right now. So we have two government-related people and the two private sector people. So very interesting discussion. So first from government people, because we would like to know more about what's the recent update of the Abenomics. Yamazaki-san, please.
Yes, thank you very much. Let me first start with overview of the development of Japan's economies. In the fourth quarter of last year, Japanese economies returned to the positive at 1.5 growth rates, and I think that the Japanese economy is on steady recovery path. And especially, I want to emphasize that very much positive development in labor markets. And as you know, that jobs to applicant ratio is now at 1.15, which is highest level in the last 22 years, and also the very good outcome of this spring wage negotiations, which is monthly pays increased by about 2.6% on average. So labor market is strong and money is steadily flowing into wages. And we expect this fiscal year's GDP growth is 1.5%. And almost all of this 1.5 will be contributed by the domestic demand. And as Tamura-san mentioned, that let me briefly touch upon the third arrow. What we are now focusing is how to mobilize Japanese cash. As you know, that while Japanese government are having huge fiscal deficit, but in corporate sector as well as household, there are abundant cash and bank deposits. So first, Japanese growth strategy to direct $3 trillion equivalent retained earnings, which is held in Japanese corporate balance sheet, and also direct $8 trillion equivalent cash and deposit held by Japanese household. So first to move this corporate sector, that Japan has introduced the stewardship code, which already almost 200 companies, investors have adopted. And also as for the corporate governance code, which will be formally introduced this June. And thanks in part to this reform, return of equity of Japanese corporate increased already from 5.8% to 8.7% over the last 2 years. And another emphasis we are placing is the how to cope with demographic development. So namely, number one is we are trying to increase participation ratio of the female forces. And the another thing is to increase acceptance of the foreign work, especially in the fields such as public works as well as shipbuildings, where the labor shortages are getting very serious issues. So I will stop here.
Thank you. So it seems good. So Hamada Sensei, you are special advisor, economic advisor to Prime Minister Abe. So can you add something?
Yes, very organized, even I think scholarly discussion of the Japanese economy, and I'm extremely pleased that Ministry of Finance has such intelligent and cautious administrator. I think macroeconomy has many good signs, though consumption tax hike dragged the Japanese economy a little longer than I expected. Labor market is tight, but inflation is not occurring, and oil price is declining. From my old age economics, that's the best thing. There is no inflation target to worry about that time. Inflation is always bad. That's universal truth beyond some point. Only thing is, in order to mobilize money, Mr. Yamasaki mentioned, we need some stimulus that people or corporations don't hold on or to the money existing. And if deflation is going on, many people would like to stick to the money balance. So I think inflation is only needed in order to unlock liquidity traps and so forth. About the regulations, I have many instances that government regulations are so bad. I am multinational individual, but when financial market is in integration, the regulation of my own account in Japan and US are tightening rather than loosening. And Haneda is very easy airport to come in, but government, like Chiba government, petitioned not to increase the Haneda. Those things are just demerit of regulation, overly regulation. And working hours should be flexible, I think. And sometimes hiring and discharging should be not constrained by many legal conditions. However, recently I have so I first thought the best thing for Japan to structurally improve is to deregulate, let people do their own way to improve productivity by competition.
Hamada Sensei, so when you are in the Yale,
yes,
as an economic professor, you are harshly attacking former BOJ Governor Shirakawa-san. Do more isn't. So now this time, Kuroda-san is doing good job according to your analysis, and Kuroda-san seems like listening to you. And since I'm here, I heard a lot of a question about what's the next move of the BOJ, Kuroda-san. So Kuroda-san's next move, do more or stay still, or what do you guess?
Good question. I think Mr. Kuroda as well as his successor, Mr. Yamasaki, knows good economics. I taught right economics to Mr. Shirakawa as well as
he was your student.
Chicago.
Yeah.
Taught him, but there was some convergence to all the.
So students always have to listen to the professor.
So
like myself.
he converted to all the monetary doctrine that has real doctrine started from Ricard position. So there are that kind of school inherited by BIS and so on. But he leaned over too much. But just to finish, if the government refrain from controlling it, does the company do the right thing? That is the question I have now. In every firm, there are president and chairman, but there are old chairman or old advisor, and so 5 or 6 offices in the same floor to retain the old custom. Some of them are not so efficient in Japan, and they would like to minimize the effect of external directors and so forth. They didn't even ask me to be one of them. So
I can ask some companies too.
maybe I'll. And I visited Keidan then. 50 executives were all male. And very effective wives of corporate chief CEOs are having different section in next door. They are doing good things, NPOs and so forth, but it's a little bit strange that 50 or 60 top companies didn't have any woman as the cap, and those women are doing social activities, NPO activities, etc., but not influencing the activities, main activities of firms. So Keidan should be reformed.
Okay, thank you, Hamada-sensei. So, as I have mentioned, very good setup. Two government-related panelists and the two private sector panelists. And among two private sector panelists, one live in Japan, one live in the US. So foreign perspective and Japanese perspective. So now Japanese stock is now hit the record point. 20,000 since 15 years ago for the first time at this level. The total capitalization of the Tokyo Stock Exchange is bigger than that of the bubble economy era. So for the two people from private sector, I want to ask you. So stock price high, and the Japanese politician, as a former politician, I feel relieved because the most correlating index for the popularity of the government is the stock price. So higher stock, higher popularity maybe to some extent. So it's good. But for your private sector people, Japanese economy is doing good, and because of the Abenomics is working. What do you view from female ladies?
Okay. So there's a joke in Japan that Abe's name, ABE, actually stands for asset bubble economy. I didn't make that joke, but that's what was initially talked about. But I think it's not 100% a joke, and that is, at the end of the day, we had a prior session, what would be plan B if they didn't try Abenomics, if they didn't try to create expectations of inflation? Well, frankly, to me, plan B is Armageddon. There is no plan B, because if you continue to stay mired in deflation when you have so much debt as a nation, you just sink under the weight of your own debt is plan B. And so everybody questions the validity of QE. Everybody questions, are the structural reforms really happening? Of course, those are obvious questions to ask, but to me, there is no option other than to try to get your economy out of deflation. And to your question, because I work in the stock market, I've been working in it for a painful 25 years now, I think the number one complaint or issue that investors have, not just foreigners, but Japanese retail investors, why they don't buy Japanese stocks, it's very obvious. It's because the governance of these companies is poor. Just be very honest about it. Because of cross-shareholdings, because of a whole variety of issues, legacy issues, whatever, that means the shareholder does not come at the top of the totem pole, but somewhere toward the bottom, right? So if you think about what Yamazaki-san just said, stewardship code, this means all of our domestic Japanese clients have to vote in the best interests of their end beneficiaries. You're thinking to yourselves, you mean they didn't do that before? The answer is no. They're now having to sign a code, and if they comply with this code, they have to do this. They have to engage also with their investee companies. That's also a first for many of our Japanese clients. Second, this corporate governance code. Japan doesn't have a code. We're having one installed in June 1. Pakistan has a code. Japan does not. This dictates behavior within companies, so they're going to require at least 2 outside directors on Japanese boards. That's revolutionary. 2, companies who own cross-shareholdings to explain the economic rationale for why they own cross-holdings. That's going to lead to what? Unwinding of cross-shareholdings. What is that going to lead to? Well, think about 1990s Germany. What happened in Deutschland before EU? It was a web of cross-holdings between banks and corporates, right? What happened? You started to see the government encouraged unwinding, right, with some tax breaks, but you encouraged unwinding. What did that do? That made companies vulnerable to takeovers. What did that lead to? That led to M&A. And if you didn't want to get taken out, what's the best defense? Raise your stock price, care about ROE, care about shareholder value. And I know that's not a perfect parallel, but for many years I thought Japan should look to the German template, right, of how you can change the structure of a society, so the structure of the capital market, so that shareholders actually come closer to the top as opposed to the bottom. So to me, if you see the evidence in the market, why is the market at 20,000? Not just because profits have doubled, which is great, but because managements for the first time ever are saying the words ROE and understanding what goes into that, not just making up a target, talking about shareholder returns, buybacks, and dividends are all-time record highs right now. Now, we still have a long way to go. Absolutely, 8% ROE is still not respectable relative to other developed markets, but we're at least moving, I think, in the right direction. So don't get me wrong, I'm not rose-colored glasses because I've been jaded by Japan for so many decades, but I think this comes to find the heart of the problem, which is excess savings in corporate Japan. You need to get that released, deployed into the economy, into capital markets, into wages, into investment. And that's how I think hopefully the virtuous cycle of Abenomics will continue.
Great, thank you. So you see the same picture as Cassie's seeing?
I think she's very much on key. From the seat I sit in, we see flows from all over the world. And people constantly ask me, is Abenomics working? And a lot of people don't understand how long Japan's been in this deflationary environment, and it takes time. And to them, I always say, yes, it is working, and it's going to work because there is no alternative. There is no plan B, as you had said. Despite the corporate governance, which has been an issue in the past, our North American buyers have been buying Japanese stocks at record rates for the last couple of years. Now, during that time, there's been flows of selling for profit taking, especially some of the hedge funds that are in it for the short play. But our long-only clients, they're always out there, and they're keeping increasing their allocation to Japan. A lot of them are playing catch-up because they feel that it's a strong move and they haven't been there yet. And some of them are already fully allocated. So that's really powerful. We have to understand what's going on in the big picture. All the 3 and the 4 arrows and everything, the Abe-san is throwing everything at this. And it's really, really powerful. And one of the more powerful things to unlock what you said, the retail and Mrs. Watanabe, is the reallocations in the pension funds. And we spoke in the private session before, GPIF, it's huge. Their allocation from 8% to 50%. This is a $1.3 trillion fund. It's the biggest allocation in the history of the world of monies, okay? Think about that for a second. 1.3 trillion being reallocated from 8% of equities in the past to 25% domestic and 25% foreign. That's a huge allocation. And so what's genius about this in the administration, what they've done, is now they take Mrs. Watanabe, the retail, and they make them owners of this, right? Because they're a pension fund, and by default, now they have to be invested in equities, which they are, and they have to want corporate governance to succeed. And so everybody's rowing in the same way. It's fantastic. It's really powerful. It takes time, but it's going to work. It's going to work, and we're seeing that. And when you unleash the $16 trillion of savings that retail has into the equity markets, 20,000 is nothing that you're going to see in the Nikkei. It's going to go 30. It's going to go higher than that. So it takes time, but what has been done, the steps that have been done, are extremely powerful. And I think time will show how powerful they are.
Good. So money doesn't sleep. It's happening in Japan because of the management is getting better. So more investment come from the sleeping money sector into the management of the Hasei, doing the best effort from the perspective of the corporate governance. I think that's a good news. So since I'm here, I heard a lot about here. So short term or mid term, Japan is good, goodbye, and never too late. But in the long run, most of people are hesitant. The biggest concern they share is the demography. So third law must be focusing on the demographic issues. And I would like government-related people or corporate sector-related people want to talk about in the Abenomics. Is there any seriously planned and seriously executing plans, policies which will fix our demographic problems? The government people can talk about what's really going on. So Yamazaki-san briefly mentioned about we are starting to import people for the labor shortage reasons, and the corporate sector people, especially Cassie-san, the female participation. So the sweeping asset is not only the money, but also the female labor force. We have so many smart ladies, just not working in the company, but we are now trying to encourage those people and come back again to the business sector, and not only the business sector, but also the management level, like Cassie-san, Prime Minister Abe is urging to so. So going back to my question, is there any good evidence the Abenomics is now doing a lot for the demographic problems? Anybody?
Okay, let me first elaborate that my remarks about two policies. Number one is that increasing the female participation ratio. So actually, that the government sets a target for increasing in the numbers of the child care facilities. But I think that is not enough. We further need like some affirmative actions to set target, and especially that in the government officials, we ourselves set our very high target and to encouraging hire more. And former times say that Ministry of Finance hire, say among 20 newcomers, only 1 or 0 or 2. But nowadays that's almost 7 or 8, 1/3 is that females. And the labor participation rate for women of age from 25 to 44 years has already increased from around 71% to 74% over the last 2 years. And so it means more than 100,000 female workers enter the job market. But this is not enough. So we are further encouraging. So that's some, I think the communication with the ordinary people or the corporate managers are very much important. And another point about labor force from the abroad is, as I mentioned, that from this April, foreign workers can be accepted in construction site as well as shipbuilding sites. And the government is also submitted laws to the current diet session in order to further expand the foreigners' job opportunities, which includes the acceptance of the foreign housekeepers in the national strategic special zones and the creation of the nursing care category in the status of residence. And I think that maybe carefully monitoring the development, we need to gradually opening up the zones to the to the all over Japan.
So inflation is happening actually in the construction sectors because the labor shortage is huge. Transportation, logistics as well. For example, big construction is going on in the center Tokyo for the preparation for the hosting Tokyo Olympics 2020, and at the same time, reconstruction is going on in the Tohoku area. 4 years ago, the area was hit by the huge earthquake. So now they are those two places are fighting to get the workers for the construction. And at the same time, Japan is now improving a tourism initiative and try to open up a casino, but not only casino, but it's so-called integrated resort. Gonna be a huge plan, but we're having problem to find the workers for construction. So now gradually, Japan is now, for the first time in the history of Japan, inviting more people from abroad, especially Asian countries, for simple job. And as Yamazaki-san touched upon, so foreign housekeepers, I think it's very, very important. In the case of Singapore or Hong Kong, they can hire the housekeepers. That is because, that is why they are, having high female participation. At the same time, they can have babies. So then going to change from Kansai area, then comes to the near Tokyo area, Yokohama, Kawasaki, and then finally Tokyo, where we're having, foreign housekeepers. And in the long run, so foreign housekeepers try to improve the Japanese language barriers. So foreign housekeepers, especially people from Philippines, maybe try to teach English when they take care of kids. So the earlier the better. So we may speak more English. So foreign housekeepers issues are also good for education. And especially, senior caregiving is a huge need. So until 2025, in 10 years, we need 1 million more senior caregivers. So, but young people in Japan doesn't want to work for the senior caregiving, and it's very expensive. So, for the first time in the Japan's history, Japanese government will import foreign senior caregivers from basically Southeast Asia for the first time from next year outside of the notorious EPS system. So I think Japan is very seriously thinking about taking more people from abroad, not only for, fix the short-term labor issues, but also changing the Japanese demography and the society itself. So can you touch upon, any other, additional evidence Japanese government doing try to fix the demographic problems?
Yeah, I'll just say a couple more things. So, when we first wrote our Womenomics report back in 1999, I can tell you for a fact that there was very little interest nor excitement about the whole topic of gender diversity. It was just not relevant. But now, as Yamazaki-san just pointed out, the job offers to applicants ratio is 1.12. That means there's 12% more jobs available than Japanese people looking for work. Think about that. Because the demographics are so severe. So if you have that situation, yes, you can import, but I think that's going to be limited to certain industries. It's not across the board that they're willing to, quote, import foreigners. So to me, if it's a choice between foreigners or women, as Adam Posen said at Davos, if people were there, he said, you can have sexism or racism, you can't have both. Sorry, I'm just quoting directly from him, but he said, they're two bad choices maybe, but he said, to be blunt, it's probably going to be the females that will first get the opportunity. So it's interesting because I'm being called by lots of CEOs to give talks on gender diversity, and I'm like, whoa, where's this coming from? How did they all of a sudden get religion? But it's the sheer economic reality that they cannot find people, or even if they find people, they can't retain that staff. So that to me is actually pretty encouraging. So it's not just them talking about, but the private sector is actually starting to feel that sense of crisis. One other thing I thought you were going to mention, Yamazaki-san, is there is a piece of legislation in the Diet, Josei Katsuyaku Suishin Hoan, which is something like women, labor participation, to facilitate women's labor participation. So this bill, if it passes the Diet, which I saw the Gender Equality Minister about a month ago, Arimura Daiji, she said that if it passes, that means any entity in Japan, public or private, with 300 or more employees would A, have to disclose gender diversity targets, so what percentage of managerial staff should be women by X date, and B, specific action plans to reach those goals. This would be an absolute first. Okay, it's not quotas on boards like in Scandinavia or in Europe, but I think quotas are very difficult in Japan's society, but at least it's A, measurement, and B, setting targets, which I think is definitely better than nothing. And now I know a lot of companies are scrambling to figure out if this passes, what kind of targets they're going to come up with, but more importantly, how are they going to get from A to B, which is going to be a huge challenge. But at least that's, to me, a good step that the government's pushing private sector at the minimum to focus on this issue.
Is there any hard truths you can add to this argument? Japanese policymakers are doing good job for the demographic fix. If not, I can add one.
Well, I think that there's no question there's a need, and you're seeing it now when they're trying to get ready for the Olympics and the workers and everything else. They just don't have any, so that's why they're forced to open up the borders and whatnot. But it's just even in corporate governance, they definitely need to change. And I, for one, being the highest-ranking non-Japanese employee of close to 60,000 people at our firm, it shows that they continuing are changing. This would never have been possible a couple of years ago, but they're bringing outside people to try, and they're being a lot more open. So I think it's definitely changing, but it takes time.
Hamada-sensei, is there anything you can add to the demographic issues?
I found probably I am the most aged, so I'm a little bit conservative. As for the nuclear electric generation, I have a very mixed idea. It is economically nuclear electricity is clean at that time, but later may be very difficult to dispose. And those who get, I think, those who argue against the nuclear generator should be ready to live in darker society in some sense. But there are divisions who gain by new electricity or by natural electricity. So I think this kind of issue is to be determined by democratic local election process, which the residents really choose. And about migration issues, I am probably the most benefactor of American liberal immigration policy. I was allowed to compete with other economists or scholars without any restrictions. I had hard time when my work doesn't go well there, but as far as I am doing fine, I was never discredited or treated against because I am not from the United States and white and so forth. So I should strongly advocate immigration. But the Japanese culture, as I see, depends on the assumption that everybody speaks Japanese, and the safety of the area depends on some kind of homogeneity of people. Look at Paris, for example. They introduced so many immigrants, the safety and environment might have been affected. So I think this is also to be determined by the voters, how much Japanese pure homogeneous culture and lifestyle should continue, or we employ more foreigners and so forth to enrich our material life.
Yeah, I agree with you. And the government is very carefully selecting the target of the from where they import the people. So they carefully studied every case done by Germany or United States, Singapore, and they're picking Southeast Asia very carefully. And they carefully select the industry from where they kickstart. For example, senior caregiving and house helpers, so they are female, and they are in needs. So it's very easy to convince the general public this industry needs people, and these ladies, not very violent and experienced, means over 40 years old. So but they are very kind, gentle, non-violent, and female, and maybe basically from Philippines. So we share a lot. So hospitality people. And I want to move to the last point is that, I heard from the people who are in the heart of the government policy making, especially the growth theory. And the pillar of the growth theory, one of the biggest pillar of the growth theory is becoming like tourism. Tourism is now, buzzword in Japanese economy. For example, 80 years ago, the tourists visiting Japan is less than 5 million, but last year, 13 million. So in 80 years, it's almost tripled. And this year, our target is 15 million, but we beat the expectation. More to come, but around 18 million we expect right now. So the goal set to the Olympic hosting 2020, it was originally 22 million goals, 22 tourists we are expecting until we host the Olympics. But currently, I talked to the influential figures in his elaborating the growth strategy, and their goal set to the over 50 million until that time. So very ambitious. But if you see the biggest tourist receiving country, do you know which country is in the world? France. France, how many they are receiving? 80 million. And next, Spain, 70 million. But we have larger neighbors. And that neighbor, in the real bottom of their heart, they love Japan. Their leadership, I don't know, but their people love Japan. So 50 million is easy to, I think, beat. And that means right now, the contribution of the tourism industry to Japanese economy is 2%. But 50 million is a 9%. 9% is the world average. So that means additional $500 billion business is coming up from tourism. And also, 50 million people staying for a while in Japan and consuming in Japan. That means that may fix to some extent the population decline. So I think tourism initiative, which is becoming like a center pillar of the growth strategy, I think this is very feasible and this is powerful for the Japanese economy, including integrated resort, casino. So we're running out of that time. So I want to go back to you. I speak too much, sorry. So final comment, everybody from 2 minutes about final word for the future of Japan. And how do you recommend? Japan is still good buy, or Japan is more buy or less buy?
Yeah, let me then quote that recently credit rating agencies downgraded Japanese credit ratings, while government refrain from making any comments on some private companies' decisions. But what I want to emphasize that Japanese government is clearly remain committed strongly to our fiscal consolidation plans. And so we are now, working for the completing our mid-term roadmap, which will make sure that our 2020 target, that is, make our primary fiscal balance surplus. And while that the government has postponed the timing of the second round of the consumption tax hike from 8% to 2% or to April 17, but this is to make sure that the current recovery of Japanese economies is, fully guaranteed, which means that because we see some weakness in the economy, so by postponing this and also we implementing some fiscal stimulus packages, we are very much confident now that Japan can seek both the growth and the fiscal consolidation simultaneously. So that's why we are very much confident about the future of Japanese economy. So my last word is investing in Japan. Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you.
One more thing just to tie in with the fiscal consolidation piece that nobody mentioned. When I go around the world, I show a chart which shows a ranking of OECD countries' tax revenues to GDP. Japan is not the high end of this chart. It's one of the lowest. Think about it. We have a 55% marginal income tax rate for individuals, a 30, now 2% roughly for corporates. These are not low rates. So why is the tax revenue base so low? Because the tax revenue collection, is not maybe as good as it could be. And part of it is because individual tax collection is very tricky insofar as Japan is one of the few countries on this planet that does not have a taxpayer ID system. Most people I meet do not know that. That's kind of shocking. And it's kind of hard to track people if they don't have a number. And that's going to change a year from now, or less than a year from now. They're going to start this My Number system, which will start to match people up with their bank accounts and brokerage accounts, I think, over the due course. So that's something that nobody really talks about. It wasn't formally part of the third arrow because it was already decided. But this, to me, is pretty game-changing from a perspective of fiscal consolidation. My last point is I'm a Japan strategist at Goldman Sachs. I'm I publish, so my published target is 22,100 in 12 months because I think ROE is going to continue to improve, not just on the basis of cyclical momentum, but like we talked about earlier, shareholder returns, capital efficiency is going to improve as well. So leverage will start to edge up. And domestics are finally buying. I think the problem with Japan's market is too much volatility, because Gaijin only own 35% of the market, yet they account for double that in daily turnover. It's like the elephant stepping in the small bathtub phenomenon. We need Japanese people to buy Japanese stocks. And this, to me, is the mission, part of the mission of Abenomics. It's not to get, frankly, more foreigners to buy Japan, although that's maybe part of it, ancillary, but I think it's really core to get Japanese people to participate in their own equity market. That will hopefully reduce the volatility, improve the Sharpe ratio, and over time eventually get more Japanese capital, all this excess savings sloshing around, to invest in the markets.
Good.
Well, that is correct. I think we do need that, and I think that's happening, whether it's forced or not, through their pension funds, but I think that they're going to start to follow. But on the theme of taxes, I know they're talking about the consumption tax, and I know the administration has been very, they're watching it very carefully, and they're delaying it and whatnot to make sure that it doesn't strangle the economic growth, and I think that's very important. But I think what's even probably more important is the corporate tax. At the rate that it is, at 35%, it's very, very high. And if you run a global organization, if you look at where money is going around the world, it's going to go where they can do business. So not just domestically, there'll be better opportunity for Japanese business, but for global companies to do business in Japan, you got to lower that corporate tax. And I think that's really important. Having said all that, there's a lot of things happening. I think the administration, it's real this time. They're doing things differently, and we're seeing some successes, and I believe Japan is a buy.
Thank you.
I strongly agree, particularly corporate tax reduction and number system. But I think this show indicates that there is something about the communication style of Japanese audience. In usual meetings, much more discussion should be come from the floor, not from us. So I'll give up my time to ask at least one person talk about any question.
Thank you. So I'm now currently residing in Singapore. Singapore lost a great leader recently, Lee Kuan Yew. I have a privilege to meet Lee Kuan Yew several times, and he always mentioned that Japan is a front runner of the big issue, which will be shared globally. But the problem with Japan is they are smart enough to understand problems, but nobody take actions. But finally, this time, my boss, Prime Minister Abe, is now making a good move. So I think Japan is a right time for you to make investment and never too late. And I was saying that they're allocating this small room for the Japanese rubber. It's a wrong decision, but this time it maybe seems like it was a good decision. But next year, please give us a better room and please give us a better time allocation and not competing with these big guys. And because this has a content too good to waste. You guys are very benefited from these great panelists. So I let the people who are not coming here down. So I hope you enjoyed it. And we're having in Singapore Asia Summit. We talk more about Japan. So in the Global Summit, this time Global Conference, only one panel about Japan, only one private session about Japan. But if you are still keep interested in Japan, in Singapore, September 17th, 18th, Singapore is a nice place. And 19th, September 19th, 18th, September 17th, 18th, the weekend we'll be having a Formula One Grand Prix. So it's always summer, but very safe, clean. And we talk more about my country, Japan. So please join the Asia Summit as well. Thank you so much. Thank you for the panelists.